Hi there everyone and welcome to the Novel Strip Show, the channel where I discuss books and comics that I've read. What I'd like to do today is pop back to July 2017 and talk about the books that I read in that month as part of the 50 book challenge, just see if my opinions etc. have changed in that time. I previously, when I was doing these videos, used to include a novel fact about each novel that I'd read, just kind of live up to the name of the channel a bit more. I've stopped doing that just now because I have less time than normal to make these videos. If it's something that you would like though, do let me know and I'll start doing it again. So just to crack straight on then, I'll go in order of the books that I liked least to the books that I enjoyed most. Okay, so first up then, we have Tony and Susan by Austen Wright. So for a basic summary, Susan Morrow receives manuscripts from her ex-husband of 15 years, asking for feedback on it. And as she's reading the manuscript, she becomes drawn into the lives of the characters and notices parallels between her past and the story's fictional characters. So we follow Susan as she's reading this narrative, and the narrative is called Nocturnal Animals, and it's a story within the story. So in terms of my opinion, I went to the cinema to see the film Nocturnal Animals, directed by Tom Ford, and absolutely loved it. So once the film was released, this book that the film was based on was re-released under the same name of Nocturnal Animals as well. So if you see Nocturnal Animals by Austen Wright, this is the same. However, when it was originally published, it was called Tony and Susan, and Nocturnal Animals is just the name of the novel in the novel. Excuse me. So yeah, in terms of what I thought of it, when I got to the book, I really didn't enjoy it that much. In terms of the film, I remember it being beautifully filmed, but also throughout there's this sense of kind of eeriness, of mystery, especially when it's the scenes that take place in the novel. There's a real sense of fear and kind of what's going to happen next, and mystery, but also unsettlingness. I think the whole thing is quite unsettling, and I didn't really get that in the book. I don't connect to the characters as I did with the characters in the film. Perhaps I would have liked it more if I hadn't seen the film first, but for me, what I was looking for from the book is to get more insight into the characters, etc., than I would be able to get in a film, because to me that's the nature of a novel. That's what you can explore that film can't, the sort of internal dialogue of each character. So I was expecting that from it, and I really didn't get that. I don't feel that I got anything more than I did from the film, and indeed the film just gave me a lot more, a much more enjoyable experience. Yeah, I didn't like the style it was written in. I didn't feel connected to either of the characters, and obviously the plot element I got from the movie anyway. So that wasn't particularly interested in. Yeah, just didn't really give me anything more, to be honest. Yeah, so I didn't really enjoy it. Originally I gave it 3 stars, however revising that, I don't know if it was bad enough to give 2 stars, because I kind of feel quite mean giving out two stars. Maybe 2.5, because it wasn't absolutely awful, but it's certainly not something that I would recommend or want to read again. Next up then, we had The Diving Bell and the Butterfly by Jean-Dominique Bourby. So this is what I didn't realise. It's actually the dictated biography of Jean-Dominique Bourby, who was the editor of French Elle and then suffered a massive stroke, and he then has to deal with locked-in syndrome. So he is conscious and he is aware. However, the only part of his body that is not completely paralyzed is his eyelid. I believe it's his left eyelid. So he can understand everyone. He's just unable to communicate. He cannot do anything other than move his left eyelid. Now, when I discussed my opinion on this, it wasn't until I was looking up some information about this before making the video that I actually realised that this was non-fiction, and Jean-Dominique Bourby was actually he's a real person. He was really the editor of French Elle. He had a stroke, and then whilst he was suffering from locked-in syndrome, he actually used his left eye to dictate this entire book. So it's an incredibly long process, but it details his experiences. And then unfortunately, he died of pneumonia 2 days after the book was released. I didn't know that when I read it, and until today, literally until I started making this video, or just before it rather, I didn't realize that. So what I originally thought about it was that I had seen the film again. It's another one where I'd seen the film first. I watched it during my degree because the film's in French. Um, and I thought it was really unique. It showed the point of someone suffering from locked-in syndrome. The cinematic techniques it uses to do that are very, very interesting. And it was, terrifying to think that this could happen to someone. And obviously, he can move his left eyelid, so they develop a way by which he can communicate just using his left eyelid. And what they do is they write out the alphabet, but instead of using the normal alphabet to make it a bit easier, they write it out due to the frequency that letters appear, and he can then blink. They'll go through the alphabet and he'll blink when he's at the right letter. And then they'll write that down, and that way he can spell out words. And that made me think that I would, having a languages degree, want to go into speech and language therapy. To be honest, I'm hoping that someday I probably will go into it. I would possibly be in the field already if the Conservatives hadn't withdrawn NHS funding. So, thank you for that, David Cameron. But yeah, so it's something that, had a profound effect on me when I saw the film. And so I was expecting a lot more again from the book. When I read the book, though, it doesn't go into much detail. I felt I couldn't really connect to the character. It was just a kind of series of events. I didn't really feel how it was affecting him emotionally, etc. And so, I just thought it wasn't particularly good, and I felt that the film expanded a lot more. It's also a very short book. Originally I rated it 3 stars, and I was going to say again I would put it down to 2.5 or to 2 stars. However, my perspective has been completely changed by the fact that I found out today that it is completely non-fiction, that the author was a real person suffering from locked-in syndrome. It's non-fiction, it's completely real, and he dictated this book just using his left eyelid. So obviously it would have been an incredibly long process. And yeah, that's just completely shifted my perspective. Obviously it's not going to be long and detailed. As I said, that was a negative thing about the book. It just can't be when that's the way that he had to dictate it. So I think actually with that in mind, I would very much like to go and read it again. And I think, I'd think of the book completely differently. As far as I was concerned, before I went into it, it was non-fiction, and it was someone, an author, imagining what it would be like to have locked-in syndrome. I did not realise it was non-fiction. So if you are going to read it, go in with that in mind, because obviously it completely marred my experience, not knowing that, I think I would need to read it again now to be able to give a fair opinion about the book. If you do go and read it, please let me know what you think, knowing now obviously that it's non-fiction and that it's detailing a real man's experience as he's living this locked-in syndrome. Next up then, we had The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. So in this book we follow Harriet and her friend Helly, who's a bit in love with her. Quite in love with her, to be honest. He'll do pretty much anything for him. And they set out to find out who murdered Harriet's younger brother when she was a baby. So he was violently killed, he was hanged from a tree, and she was the only witness to this, but she was a few months old. She decides that she's going to find out who killed her brother, and when she thinks she has an answer, it's kind of about what she does once she thinks she's found out the murderer. So I actually found this really difficult to rate. It's a very, very long book. It's absolutely massive as well. The book that I have is is the biggest book on my bookshelf. That's not a comic or a kind of like hardback book or anything like that. It's massive, and it's still 555 pages. So, good long, but it took me ages to read, and I thought I would love it. I was expecting to love it again, because I absolutely loved the Secret History, which I've mentioned in my previous video. I'll link it here, if you'd like to hear me talk about that. But I didn't love it, unfortunately, because nothing really happens, and this is the problem that I have. The writing of the book is absolutely beautiful. I think it's incredibly skillfully done. Every sentence was a pleasure to read. I could imagine everything and picture it really clearly in my mind. I could imagine Harriet's quite eccentric aunt. I could imagine Harriet, and I could imagine Helly, and I saw everything really clearly in my mind. There's one scene, for example, where there's a load of snakes, or actually snakes kind of recur throughout, but those scenes are really vividly in my mind, as if I'd read, well, not even read them, as if I'd experienced them myself, because it's so beautifully written. However, and yeah, it's a great skill to have. It's a great skill that Donna Tartt has, and I truly don't think that anyone other than Donna Tartt could write so beautifully about absolutely nothing, because in the whole 555 pages, it felt like nothing actually happened. So the main problem that I had is, and I'm just going to read out the first couple of paragraphs on the blurb, because this is what I expected going into it. So it says, although the Cleaves generally revelled in every detail of their family history, the events of the terrible Mother's Day were never discussed. On that day, 9-year-old Robin was found hanging from his neck from a tree in his own garden. 12 years later, the mystery, with its taunting traces of foul play, was no nearer a solution than it had been on the day it happened. This isn't good enough for Robin's younger sister, Harriet. Only a baby when the tragedy occurred, but now 12 years old and steeped in adventurous daring of favourite writers such as Stevenson, Kipling and Conan Doyle, Harriet is ready and eager to find out and punish her brother's killer. So that's just kind of half the blurb there. But that, to me, that very much says to me that this is a mystery and Harriet is setting out to solve it. So I expect a resolution. I expect it to be solved. I expect to be told what happened with this. And you never ever get that. So a little spoiler there, apologies for that. But I think it's important to know that if you're going into this book and you're thinking it's a murder mystery or a kind of whodunit, it's definitely not. And that, to me, I didn't get that from the blurb. From the blurb, I thought there would be at least an element of mystery and it would have some sort of resolution. And the fact that it doesn't just really distracted me, and it meant that all the beautiful writing felt completely pointless and like a complete waste of time because I never got to find out what happened. Now, this is quite different from The Secret History. In The Secret History, you know that there's been a murder committed, and very early on, you know who died for a start, and who committed the murder. So you're told that quite early on. There's no sort of mystery element to it there. You know that it's happened, and you know it quite early on, and that's just there. That's just what it is. So you're not expecting a mystery. You're not expecting to find out who was murdered, why he was killed, how he was killed, etc. It's more about how the characters are related to one another and how this act of killing someone affects them. And if that had happened here, if it had been made very clear from the start that there wouldn't be a resolution ever found, it would just be Harriet thinking she knows and thinking she's found the murderer, even though she clearly hasn't, because she's just, makes a load of assumptions. If that had been the case, then I might have been able to accept that a bit more, because I wouldn't have expected something that the book wasn't going to give me. However, from the back and from the very beginning, it hooks you with this element of mystery, and then it's never ever resolved. So I get, the imagery that it portrays is great. The idea of the town in Mississippi where it's set, yes, I think that was built up and I could imagine it quite vividly. And I do think, it's interesting to explore what happens once someone is convinced, especially, a child, even though she's a very intelligent child, she's only 12, what happens once she's convinced that she's found her brother's murderer, what she then does. That's interesting. But if you're going to have this mystery hook, for me anyway, you need to have some sort of resolution. And yeah, that really frustrated me, and it just kind of ruined the whole thing for me. Other people have said that, it's not the point of the book. If it's not the point of the book, why not just mention it? Why not just, say you're never going to find out who does it, and make that kind of clearer. So yeah. One interesting thing that I wanted to talk about as well, with this book is one of my friends, Caitlin. She, I think I've spoken about her before because we discussed books quite a lot. But she mentioned, she's one of the ones anyway who mentioned that I should read The Secret History. She's also read The Goldfinch, which I haven't read yet, and loved that as well. But she mentioned that she just couldn't get into The Little Friend at all, and she thinks it's because it's out of those 3 books that Donna's published so far, Donna Tartt, she thinks it's because this one is written in third person as opposed to first person, like The Goldfinch and The Secret History. So that's quite an interesting perspective. Personally, I did still think the writing was beautiful, maybe even better than The Secret History, but it didn't necessarily work for what the book was trying to do. It didn't really work for getting into the kind of, I don't know, the character's mindset and thoughts and her reactions to thinking she's found her brother's murderer. Yeah, because it was written in third person, maybe that did lead to me expecting a sort of mystery whodunit thriller even more, and yeah, I just didn't get that. I'm still going to read The Goldfinch though, because like I said, it was still beautifully written, but I definitely wouldn't recommend this as a place to start with Donna Tartt. Possibly wouldn't recommend it at all. I ended up giving it 3 stars because that was kind of in the middle. I'd probably stick to that, but it's a tough one for me, so I'm just going to move on. Just before I do that, actually, I do want to add one more thing that really, really bugged me, was that the cover features a big, creepy, scary-looking doll. That doesn't feature anywhere in the book at all. So why on earth is that on the cover? Again, it just felt like the whole thing was being missold. So that really annoyed me. What I'm actually going to do, because this video's got quite long, I'm going to make a part 2 and discuss the 2 remaining books that I enjoyed most in this month in that video. So please look out for that. Thanks for watching.